Good morning. Thank you for joining for the reading of Christ's letters. This is the second installment of letter 5, which is a very wonderful letter. I wanted to get right on. Our energy last night was just so wonderful. Christ was so present through each one of us. We could just sense it. I believe I speak for the community. So what was done last night was just an incredible experience, and I just wanted to get on it with that energy and bring the whole community through me as I kind of relive the energy of last night and bring it through this morning's reading. Okay, and I'm amazed when I looked at how much we covered. It's amazing. So I guess I don't talk a whole lot in this. And again, it's not me, it's the Christ of me, the Christ of you, speaking directly to us through itself, from itself. So first I'll let you know where we're starting. I'm sorry, it's just so, last night we had some old friends and one really missing old friend who's in Greece and not able to be in contact with us. In this time, she has different places where she has a signal. And old friends and some recent friends and a new friend. So we had a good number on last night. It was probably about 8 of us. And it was good to look up and see all these people in the screen. Most turn our camera off and mute ourselves when we come on so we don't disturb whatever's going on. And then we unmute and turn the camera back on when we want to say something, add something. So that's just what we did last night. It was just incredible. So I want to tell you where we're beginning. We're in letter 5. And if you're searching, you could just search on a bunch of asterisks because the paragraph follows that. So reading from Christ Returns, Reveals Startling Truth. It's page 216, paragraph 3. If you're reading from Christ Returns, Speaks His Truth, the book form, and the first edition, that's got kind of a cloud like an evening sky with the moon shining through. It's kind of nice, serene picture. That's page 246, paragraph 5. If you're reading for the draft just before the production of Christ Return Speaks His Truth, it's page 155 at the bottom of the page. If you're reading from the draft before that one of Christ Speaks His Truth, the first draft is page 14, paragraph 6. And if you're reading from the original manuscripts from way back when, it's page 19, the bottom paragraph. And if you're reading from the ebook, Christ, is page 189, paragraph 3. And what I did is I searched for the asterisks when I did the search, and I just want to commend the author of the ebook because she has added so much that has not taken anything away from the letters. And an instance like this, when I searched on asterisks, they didn't show up. She replaced it with the number 5 and something like Christ's purpose for coming again. You know, he says this over and over, his purpose. So I just found that to be it truly is a study guide. And if you can get that, I mean, if you want to get that, I think you have to get it with special permission. And ask me, I'll give you the email address. And you can ask me at chapelinthesky@aol.com. So that's chapelinthesky@aol.com. So with all this, as we just allow ourselves to just quiet our minds, we know where we're beginning. We come into this time for me with great anticipation of what will be revealed during tonight's reading, this morning's reading. What will affirm us in what we are doing Christ's way, as well as challenges us to what we may not yet understand, and open and willing to get the fullness of the intention behind these letters to free us from the bondage of a false God, a mythical God, coming into the God that's within us, around us, through us, as us, the only creator. We get to tell it what to create. So I'm grateful as we just surround ourselves with this energy of love, of well-being, of safety and protection, of growth, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, on all planes, levels, dimensions of which we are aware and those we are not aware of yet. Christ truly nourishes and nurtures us in this process. It's in just committing to the letters as Christ requests and meditate on them that more of the Christ, the truth of us, is revealed. Because the truth of existence is within us. It's everything that is. It's every cell of our body, every organ, the intelligence, the consciousness, the physicality, the way everything works together is all consciousness. And when we realize that we direct this consciousness, that our world is what we consciously put out there, perceive it to be, that's what it becomes. And now Christ has come in 2000 to say, humanity didn't get it as a whole 2,000 years ago. So I, the Christ of Jesus, the Christ of Buddha, the Christ of Muhammad, the Christ of all the masters and all the teachers, have come to you again to bring this truth and give another opportunity for humanity to save itself from the destruction if it continues its current course of action. In every moment, our thoughts are constructive or destructive, or status quo. And the status quo will still be constructive or destructive for our own individual self. So with our minds open, our hearts open, our intellect just observing all that comes, without reaction, without limits, just a total openness and observing, allowing the truth to reveal itself. We come to these letters for Christ to speak to each of us directly, infusing us from within the truth of our being, the true processes of creation in which we play a major role. And let this be the attitude of ourselves, the attitude of our world. Through this we bring peace on earth, heaven on earth. The era, the time of love and peace and joy and fulfillment. Breathe this in. Breathe this out. Expect it. Anticipate it. Look for it and see it through the eyes of the Christ of us, perceiving a new world, a new earth, a new humanity for ourselves and all around. Look for the good and praise it. Be thankful for it. Bless it. Even the seeming negative has a blessing when we look at it from this perspective. Just let this be through this reading. Be in this space, this beingness, and allow Christ to reveal itself from within us, the truth of our being. And I just thank last night's collective for this meditation and for you being with me, for us to be with each other and allow Christ to just bring this forth. What a beautiful vision, isn't it? And we are the bringer forths of it as we allow ourselves to walk Christ's way. Okay, in the previous paragraph, Christ is talking about consciousness. So he continues, that something more that the soul craves is the true contact and reunion with its source of being. Christ says this often through the letters. It's what he calls ascending and to ascend. It's coming into this consciousness where our soul has reconnected with the source of us. This is the only sin, as it says in Richard Bach's Illusions, is to limit the is. That we limit the is by separating ourselves from it. The source and its expression is without separation. When we look at nature, we don't see any separation of a tree being a tree that we know of. You know, I don't even know if a tree knows it's a tree. It knows it exists. And it knows it has everything it needs to exist. And as it exists in its environment is also nourished from it. So everything participates. So Ernest Holmes calls it the God within and the God without is one God. That's also clear. So this is what these next few paragraphs, Christ is really bringing this home to us. So we really know with absolute certainty, to the degree that we believe the words, the intention of these letters, it's up to us whether we believe or not. I believe them wholeheartedly because they keep freeing me more and more from attachment and unloving thoughts and so forth. So this is the goal, Christ says, of the soul, is to reunite, to become one with the illness it is. So with all that said, I probably won't just interrupt as much as I did last night because I said this in chops. So you'll just hear this as I read, as you read along with me, you'll just see what I've just said coming to life. You know, it's like I gave it an interview, an overview, and now Christ will give us the depth. That something more that the soul craves is the true contact and reunion with its source of being. While you may have drawn a certain amount of spiritual growth by following the path of perceiving only the good, the truthful and loving, you remain an entity functioning alone in your own earthbound domain, being unassisted by the eternal, infinite universal. Once you realize the nature of the universal and turn your thoughts to making true contact with it, you begin to realize you are no longer alone. You are supported by the reality which supports the universe. And just as a quick example, there's a thought above the thought you're thinking right now. You have a certain concept of what you've just heard, and there's another one available to you. And our job is to keep listening and get the fullness of what we've just heard. And that's why Christ encourages us, meditate, meditate, meditate. Spend time on this. Soak it in. What is it saying? What does it mean? How am I using it? How can I see it being used? So he's saying, I want to clarify this because he's saying if we only look for the good and ignore everything else, that's an intellectual process. There's still we can say is discerning, but it's also judging. It's also a separation. Unless we see everything as good. Okay, and that's the difference. If I see there's a good as opposed to something less, then I'm in separation. But if I see even the something less as something good, that's the way the Christ of us sees it. That's the way it creates. That is the true perception and purpose of our world. And that uplifts our belief because it's like, oh, I'm always perceiving from the same place. And when I say making true contact with it, I mean that the prayer of supplication for this benefit or that is not making true contact with your source of being. A true prayer is for the highest and best good for the individual and all concerned, even for ourselves. We don't wish for things or hope for things. We raise our consciousness vibration energy to the place that is in direct connection, attraction to that other. And this is what Christ talks about through this letter. Your prayer is certainly received into the source of being, regardless of what we're asking. Our prayer is always received at the intention that we put it out with. If we put it out with doubt, it's going to be responded from that same way. So again, your prayer is certainly received into the source of being, and an answer is frequently received swiftly, and the need is fulfilled, even as you have asked. But true contact with the source of your being is only experienced when you have sufficiently cleansed your consciousness of the gross human ego drive and have spent some time in meditation and a regular, emotionally powerful reaching out in consciousness to your source, seeking contact and renewal and refreshment of spirit. That came out very choppy, but it's, again, it's one of those long sentences that needs to be contemplated. There's so much in it, so much telling us this is why we have the life we have. This is why we have the world that we have, is because of this very thing. This is the true purpose behind existence, a constant and mutual reciprocation of communication between the source of all being and creation. So it's not just me and you, it's the environment around each of us, and then the environment around each of us becomes one environment. Everything is within the one. In consciousness, there's no distance between us. Okay, and if we can get this concept, we just really see a much bigger world, and we see how all the pieces fit together, just as the forest and the rivers and so forth, and their natural intelligence. Here I would remind you that when I lived on earth, I made it abundantly clear every day to the Jews that of myself alone I could do nothing. I constantly stated, it is the Father does the work, not I. I have come at this time to enable you to make the transition from the earthbound human consciousness to that of enlightenment, when a person knows that he or she finally knows the truth of being. Not just believe it, and actually not just know it, but to be it. That's the ultimate of the embodiment, of the ascension of our consciousness. It's actually the ascension into the consciousness that's above us. I mean, the consciousness and truth is infinite. I'm not going to go there, sorry. Undoubtedly, deeply religious people, indelibly indoctrinated with religious dogmas and theology, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or belonging to any other religious persuasion, may find it difficult, even painful at first, to accept and make good use of these letters. For a conditioned and programmed mind is like concrete. Cherished beliefs used as talismans, emotional supports and affirmations to give strength in times of crisis, are emotionally imprinted in the subconscious and usually incorporate in them a fear of offending God when contemplating moving on to some higher truth. Unless there is a sincere longing to know the truth of being rather than traditional beliefs, these mental patterns are almost impossible to annihilate in the mind and emotions, and they block true spiritual progress. Oh, that's right. You're reading along, so this really doesn't need to be restated. I know as I'm speaking this, I can feel the truth, the absolute truth of what Christ is revealing. I have come expressly to help those who have the will to do so, move beyond these barriers to true enlightenment. Talking to you and me. Therefore, if you feel intuitively that the words on these pages are truth, and you feel drawn to them, have confidence you are ready to begin the spiritual journey outlined through these letters, and I am at hand to give you the courage to pursue it until you reach your goal, which is true spiritual enlightenment, newness of life, strength, will, strength of will, and a finding of what I termed the kingdom of heaven. I apologize for the interruption that you didn't see, but I had to set my book up better so I could read easier than I had been. So, and in doing so, the way my brain works, I forgot where I left off. So I'm going to begin with daily sincere meditation because it's so important. Daily sincere meditation and prayer enables a mental cleansing to take place, and gradually truth and understanding replaces the old myths which once were so dear to you. At the outset of the following teachings, I, the Christ, must remind you that yours is not a solid universe. As you probably know, according to your scientists, solid matter, the visible substance of the world, is really composed of energy particles. So there's individualizations within. The truth of being of your earthly dimension rests on this fundamental reality of creation. And that is that nothing is solid, that everything can be manipulative. And Christ goes into this in what I call the white water area of this letter. Excuse me. To understand my teachings regarding the truth of being, it is necessary to grasp this fundamental seeming emptiness underlying all your created world. And he, further on in this letter, he talks a lot about space, because if you've ever, everything that you go microscopic and then microscopic or miniscopic, or however it goes to the microcosm, there's always space around whatever entity we're looking at. There's always something around it. There's always something around it. And when we get down to the very basic, we see that around everything, the tiniest discernible form that we can see within a cell, within a molecule, within the atom, within the everything, is still discernible, and around it is space. So nothing is solid, nothing, nothing, nothing. Everything has space around it. And Christ is telling us it's very important for us to investigate this space, this no thingness that's around everything, because that's from what everything comes, So, okay. The majority of you know this fact of existence intellectually, but it has not yet even remotely filtered through to your consciousness to give you a new perspective of the world and existence itself. You continue as you have done for millennia, thinking that your world is solid and the conditions of the body and all other external phenomena are beyond your control. You believe you are a victim of existence, instead of which the reverse is true, and your daily lives reflect these beliefs. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary for me to return and help you move on to a higher perception of truth. This is why he was killed. This is the truth he tried bringing forth. And oh, that he were allowed to live, and oh, that people were not threatened by the mythical God that Jesus came out of the desert to dispel. And so here, 2,000 years again, he's come to assist humanity as a whole to disregard the mythical God and find the God within, the true creator of our body, our life. As I said in letter 1, after enlightenment in the desert, I came back into my world of Palestinian towns and villages and immediately began to control the elements of matter, wherever I saw the necessity to help those who were deprived or suffering. I've come to show you exactly why I was able to do this. This again, we have to remember that nothing is solid. I have come to show you exactly why I was able to do this. As I revealed to you in letter 1, during the time I received full illumination in the desert, I was shown that matter was not really solid. I was not given to understand exactly how the electrical particles which I termed the shimmer of motes took on the appearance of visible matter. I only knew that these motes were moving at high frequencies of speed within God mind, and God mind was therefore universal. I perceived that God mind was both a creator and substance of all things within creation itself. Of this, I was absolutely certain. And I had a conversation with a young man delivering Charles Chips back in 1980. And I said to him, wow, this year 80, or he told me this year 80 is just the year, because 8 is the symbol of infinity, and 0 is the circle of no beginning, no end, the never-ending cycle, the never-ending life. And later on, I said something about being the clay of the potter, and he said, oh no, my friend, you will find that you are the potter and the clay. So back in 1980, I was introduced to this, so that I had already gotten it, but I was open to it, and he opened it, he planted that seed. So to me, this is what Christ is saying here. I only knew that these motes were moving at high frequencies of speed within God mind, and God mind was therefore universal. So the creator of the created. And as we become aware that we are the creator of our creation, now we can take responsibility in creating it differently if we so choose. I perceived that God mind was both the creator and substance. So that's where I went off, sorry. Of all things within creation itself. Of this, I was absolutely sure. I also saw very clearly that human thought, when fraught with conviction or emotion, radically affected the process of manifestation of visible forms. Therefore, the human mind could and did and does interfere with the true intention of God mind, as long as we believe we're separate. It was a thrilling and exalting realization, since the myths taught me by the Jewish rabbis were clearly false and were immediately swept out of my mind. I embraced the truth with excitement, since I now realize why people experience misery and suffering. This emanated from their own thought processes. We're addicted to drama, and drama brings us into itself. But if we can remain, as I say, we don't help anyone by jumping into the quicksand to get out. We have to stand on solid ground. And so when we know all is working for good, and know that, and believe that, and see that, and bring that forth, even just with our understanding, it shifts our energy, and therefore shifts the energy of those around us. So Christ tells us we play a major role in the creative process. I was also given to see the communities of living particles, which science has termed cells at work. Within every living thing, I was aware of the divine harmony controlling the work of the cells, which were busily building and maintaining the various parts of physical bodies of all living creatures and plant life, big and small. This is why I drew heavily on the countryside, to give examples of the immanence and activity of the Father within the least of wildlife, such as plants and birds. As I have clearly explained in letters 1 through 3, I called God mind the Father, because I was enabled to see, perceive the true nature of the God mind. It was determined that when I returned to the people of Palestine to describe the revelations I had received, they would understand that their beliefs imbued in their very consciousness was, by the rabbis, was entirely false. So he was coming back, knew this was going to be so easy. I found the truth. I know the truth. I find that the truth works. And I'm going to give this truth to you. You're going to receive it and accept it and say, wow, isn't life an awesome experience? But instead, the fear of Jehovah and them being outside of their belief, outside of that myth, they were afraid of the punishment, which eventually killed Jesus. But he still brought the truth that can save the world. As I mentioned above, out of this knowledge, I was able to perform miracles, in quotes, and control the elements where appropriate and necessary. You know, the calming of the storm isn't just a myth. I've seen myself do that, not just the storm within, you know, or the storm without. Anytime that I'm in a conflicting situation, I call upon that power that can still the storm and bring calm and serenity and peace, or I leave. If it's not comfortable, if I'm not welcome there, and to be welcome there means I have to be in a place of peace and serenity. If I'm not welcome to be in that, then I will leave, because I desire and deserve peace and harmony. Just as I long to explode the myths which possess the minds of the Jews in Palestine, so do I yearn to show you that many of the theories put forth by your scientists have been prompted by a strong reaction to the church dogma and doctrines in years gone by. And he explains this. To understand this statement, you must realize that until the time of Darwin, while the various Christian churches held dominance over the minds of the populace, it was generally accepted that the universe had been created exactly as written in Genesis in the biblical Old Testament. pardon me. When men of science attempted to announce their discoveries and theories, they were forced to describe their new beliefs in the presence of enormous religious opposition. Consequently, they found it necessary to concentrate much of their mental energy on proving the prophets' pronouncements wrong, because they had to deny. Anyway, Christ presents here that because that was the focus of their mental energy and their intellectual use, they couldn't let it be free to pursue the higher vibrations of their understanding. They were forced into this limitation by their peers, not just the church, but the church so imbued the scientists of that day, and still today we see it imbuing medical and morals and so forth. We see the church very strong in controlling a right way or a perfect way or a good way while denying all else is bad or wrong. And in doing this, it restrains, it limits, it confines the truth of existence. Because if everyone were allowed to express ourselves just as the trees in the forest, the birds, the squirrels, the insects, the fish in the seas and all that, we allowed everyone to express that, we would have harmony in the world. We know there are those who are not in harmony with this and need to be readjusted or re-educated or educated to begin with. Because when we know that our consciousness is a creator, I want to create peace, I want to create joy, I want to create happiness. That's my true essence of creation. Everything in the universe is there to play, to have fun. Only humans have this thing called fear. We can call fear as we look at it in nature, but that's our label that we put on it. They just work instinctually. They work always in tune and alignment with the one. They're never out of alignment with the one. And the one is always showing them what to be in the now moment to perform their purpose in the environment, in the purpose of the environment that they support and are supported by. So that's a lot, and I apologize for that, but it's, I just love this. So what Christ is saying, go back to what he's saying, is that, so the scientists back then were very limited in how they could pursue science. Anything that they went beyond the physical, they were challenged with. So their intuitions were stymied in many ways, or they were punished. So in doing so, in defending their way over the prophet's way, excuse me, in doing so, their agenda caused them to lose clarity of vision, and they also became ego-driven, because if the intellect is more ego than Christ, Christ is more heart, ego is more intellect, more judgment, and more analyzing. That's the word I want to use. Analyzing everything in conjunction with what I want, what should be. Thereafter, excuse me, I'm going to try to clear this. Thereafter, any intuitive perception proposed by the scientific fraternity was derided and rejected out of hand by other scientists. Because of this mental climate, the pendulum of the search for truth swung solely to an undeviating belief in reason and logic, thus imprisoning the human intellect in materialism for the answers to all origins of life and existence. Okay, I've made another adjustment to that from which I'm reading, because I'm thinking maybe that's got my chin too low and causing this disturbance in my throat that I know it would be hard for me to listen to it because it's hard for me to speak to it. Okay, I'm going to reread these last two sentences as my voice is more clear. Thereafter, any intuitive perception proposed by the scientific fraternity was derided and rejected out of hand by other scientists. Because of this mental climate, the pendulum of the search for truth swung solely to an undeviating belief in reason and logic, using the intellect, thus imprisoning the human intellect in materialism for the answers to the origins of life and existence. I love analogies. I grew up, my dad's hobby, one of his hobbies, was tropical fish. And if you have too many fish in a small tank, they can only grow so big. It limits their growth. So the fewer fish you have in a tank, or the larger tank you have for many fish, the more into their natural size they can grow. And so it is with our consciousness. If our mindset is this much, and we're told that's the only truth there is, and we're not allowed to search outside of this mindset, and that's how the ministers of traditional religion have been taught. They've been taught a mindset of Jesus, being a sacrifice for our sins, and there's no truth beyond that. Any truth beyond that is of Satan or the devil or something like that. That's why these letters are so important, is to break that mindset, to open that mindset to, wow, brotherly love is what Jesus came for. Heaven on earth is what Jesus came for, not being sacrificed for our sins, because in God there is no sin, and we learn that later. But so this is the mental climate that the scientists were confined to, which has kind of separated many scientists from so-called religion, because they draw that parameter of this is science, this is tangible, this is what can be seen, this is factual. Anything other than that, that's just the unknown. That's what everything comes from, but there's no investigation of the importance of what that something beyond the facts and what can be analyzed is, okay? Therefore, it is absolutely necessary for me to refute some of the scientific theories and show them to be as erroneous as the so-called truths of Christian doctrine. In arriving at some of these theories, scientists and churchmen alike have dipped into the realms of unproven, preposterous supplications to answer questions which have previously been unanswerable by the earthly mind only. So it's like we make up stories like the world ends at the horizon. That's just something we can only go as far as we perceive. If we're brave enough to go to the horizon and see, gosh, the horizon is always in front of me. It's always in front of me. I'm not going to fall off. We change our perception of it. So this is what Christ is doing here. He's revealing to us the truth of who we are, so we can relax in the analyzing and go to the thought above the thought, to go to that dimension that has all the answers, all the solutions, all the alternatives. And from that, we can choose which one we want to bring activity to, okay? Having told you that the substance of your material world is basically electrical particles agitated at high speed within space, your science is unable to tell you why such energy particles take on the density and form of matter, except to speak of forces of fusion which happen to create the elements. Science cannot tell you what is the motivating factor which draws particles into the form of elements. Neither can science tell you from whence such energy particles originally came, except to say that they were released during the time of the Big Bang, which they believe gave the first impetus to creation. One Big Bang. Why a sudden Big Bang? Of what? What was the motivating factor behind it? Science speaks about electromagnetism, but cannot say from whence come such energies which appear and disappear. Where do they go? Why do they come back? From the human perspective, There appears to be no intelligible activity within or behind its work. Science says that electromagnetism just is a simple fact of existence, yet it produces highly purposeful and intelligent work in the form of millions of billions of substances of which the universe is made. How does this happen? There's nothing that electromagnetism has brought into visible being which the human mind can deem to be lacking purpose or meaning. Everything has purpose and meaning, even that which we do not believe. Desiderata says, basically everything is important. Even the dull and ignorant are important. It's for us to listen because everything is expressing truth. Science ignores this most basic and vital level of creation. Without an answer to this question as to why everything which has been brought into visible manifestation by the activity of the twin energies of electromagnetism is invariably purposeful, successful, and rational, nothing of any value in the search for your origins will be discovered. I can only find that which I seek. So if I'm only seeking the physical purpose behind this, the physical law behind this, that's all I can find. I'm not still looking for that law itself that works through and as everything. Until science can probe and discover the reality of the space in which electrical particles of visible being are supported, science will forever remain behind locked doors of materialism. It will be barred to eternal truth and universal wisdom and imprisoned within the bondage of reason alone. Reason which is solely the product of the finite activity of brain cells. It is to the true nature of the space I intend to introduce you. And he talks about that later, but first he must talk about something else. But before proceeding to this, I must first bring many highly pertinent questions to your attention. Down the ages, much of the work produced by electromagnetism has appeared to the mind, vision, and touch of living entities as being solid, unchangeably durable. Metals, wood, rocks, living entities were all believed to be composed of solid, inanimate, or living matter. With such a belief in a solid universe, it is only natural that the mystical prophets of old should have envisioned a mighty individual possessing enormous powers in creating all the solid substances of the universe. In visualizing such a mighty individual, it was only natural they should perceive a kingly figure of universal control, possessing a retributive nature when controlled with the behavior of mankind, which created a turbulent society. In other words, we judge, we've been told to judge good and bad, right and wrong, and those just and unjust kind of things. And so we created a God that does that because we're made in the image and likeness of that God. So this is who man is, so obviously this is what God is. But the Bible says that differently, doesn't it? It doesn't say we create God in our image and likeness. It says we are man created in the image and likeness of God. So it's up for us to find out what God is so we know who we are. And that's what Christ is doing. Christ is telling us what God is through telling us who we are. Neither prophets of old nor science of today has been near to the truth of existence. Both have completely missed the truth. Science says that life began when in some unexplained way, a correct combination of chemical reactions produced a molecule capable of making copies of itself by triggering further chemical reactions. Such a description of the enormous and teeming complexity and power of the life force as being discernible because it is capable of replicating itself reveals the basic impoverishment of scientific perception and thought which produce such a theory. Furthermore, the suggestion that such a combination of inanimate chemicals could get together in a specific way, accidentally, to produce such an astounding result of self-replication remains unquestioned scientifically. This is because the finite mind, even, even though scientists cannot deal with such a strange eventuality of uninitiated self-replication, it is too suggestive of a magical occurrence, of some intervention from an unimaginable source which scientific men dare not contemplate for fear of ridicule. Being different, which I've always been the brunt of ridicule, but I love myself enough to say that doesn't bother me. Or if it does, it's for me to get over it. This sheep-like acquiescence is considered more scientific than producing inspired theories blocked by the materialistic laws science has established for itself. This block to future scientific progress prevents science properly investigated in the realm of mind and spirit until some enlightened scientist devises convention and dares to cross the borderline between the seen and the unseen. Prophets of old, if presented with the theory of molecular self-replication, would have no difficulty with such a magical occurrence. It would say that God made the chemical combinations and imbued them with life. That would not be the right explanation either. That sounds like God is doing something. The replication is God itself, becoming itself. It is this old religious concept of a God on high, created from afar, which is blocking the man of science from moving forward to more spiritually aware revelations and reflections. Therefore, despite science's seeming emancipation from age-old doctrines, it is still as mentally bound and hindered by fears of ancient shibboleths as in the 19th century. It adopts its ridiculous theories because it has not yet perceived the reality of our source of being behind and within the living molecule. Continuing its story of creation, science states that after the self-manufacture of living molecules capable of replicating themselves, they formed themselves into a living cell, so small it cannot be seen by the naked eye, which became the building block for all the multiplexity of living organisms, including plants, insects, reptiles, birds, animals, and man himself. Therefore, all living things have a common ancestor, the first living molecule. Scientific approach. Science cannot explain why the self-replicating molecule combined themselves into a living cell. It remains a mystery to science to this day. The living, I know where we're going now, it's really exciting. The living cell, your science tells you, is endlessly repeated in a billion differing forms. It is the building block of the visible universe. How can this be? What impulse motivates such replication? Science cannot say. Entrenched in its own blindness, it has dragged people down into materialistic blindness with it. And now, the first living cell deserves the undivided attention of anyone seriously seeking the spiritual dimension and the mainspring of existence. Because the first living molecule and the first living cell are the very first evidence of some is the first living evidence of some intelligent activity within matter, within the universe. The foremost feature displaying sense and sensibility is a function of the membrane which covers the cell, giving it protection and individuality. Think about this miraculous phenomenon. And so Grace is talking about the membrane of the cell as encompassing the body, just as our skin encompasses our body and all the intelligences within our body. So as he talks about the cell here, think about our bodies as well. The cell takes in from the environment only selected nourishment through the membrane. Not only does the cell take in the right nutrition, but having utilized the nutrition, the cell rids itself of the waste through the permeable membrane. So things come in, things go out. The membrane is the gateway, just like our epiglottis covers our trachea, our breathing mechanism when we're swallowing. Sometimes when we have it go down the wrong way is because our epiglottis didn't fully close. So it's the same thing. It's at this gate, except there's an intelligence behind it. You know, we interfere with our intelligence when it goes down the wrong way. You should ask yourself how the purely physical membrane of the cell, invisible to your eye, can distinguish and select the correct nourishment to enhance its well-being, and then exercise sufficient discernment to rid itself of unwanted toxic matter. Do you not see a high degree of purposefulness within all this activity? And can you believe that such purposefulness is accidental? And is not purpose the very hallmark of intelligence? Excuse me again. My throat is usually more awake than this in the morning. Not only this, the membrane of the cell continues to do this work of selection of nutrition and discarding of waste in a billion different circumstances and conditions relating to survival within differing species and differing circumstances and differing conditions relating to the survival within differing species. Oh, I read that. Is this not evidence of purposefulness displayed within every single action of every single species, be it insects, plants, reptiles, birds, animals, and human beings? Could you not describe the universe as being the consistent and undeviating impulse of purposefulness made visible within the realm of visible matter? Is the spirit of purposefulness a physical element or one of consciousness? Is the spirit of purposefulness a physical element or one of consciousness? And whichever one you believe is true. And if you can accept that purposefulness is an undeniable creative impulse behind existence, then can you move on to the next perception of your universe as being the visible manifestation of an intelligent appraisal of cause and effect, clearly evident within living matter? For if the living cell can select the right nourishment and also provide for the elimination of toxic waste, this simple activity displays an awareness of the need for digestion and also foresees the resultant buildup of toxic waste and the need for the elimination of such waste to endure the continued health of the cell. Is this not a clear indication of an intelligent appraisal of cause and effect? Furthermore, science says that the cell contains a nucleus, which might be likened to the brain of a human being, since it conveys messages, and its most important function is the storage of information, the library which contains not just the details relating to one cell, but of the whole body in which it resides. It's everywhere present. That's how this harmony works, because the consciousness of the organ directs all the purposes of all the individualized cells of that organ, what to do and how to perform. So just like we see the birds all go in one direction, then immediately go into another direction, and they seem to just float through the sky as one huge flock of birds, all individual, but all moving in concert, in harmony, as if there's an orchestrator to it all. Or we may have seen it in schools of fish that do the same thing. They're all swimming in one direction and immediately all turn in another direction. This is how the organ of our body works, that there's an over-consciousness. constructing, but that's orchestrating. That's the word I want. There's an over-consciousness orchestrating all of this. Okay. In fact, on investigation by science, it would appear that the cell itself is a system of chemical messages carried out in a purposeful, intelligent, and intelligible way. How could this happen if the origins of the cell's molecules were only inanimate chemical elements? Would you dispute that behind every messenger with a message to convey, there is intelligent thought or consciousness? And behold how accurate are the messages transferred from cell to cell to ensure the accurate replication of certain species for millions of years. At what point in creation then did consciousness creep into living organisms? And how did intelligent thought, which weighs and decides, come into the field of unconscious inanimate matter? Without inherent consciousness, how much informed, without inherent consciousness, how can so much informed and informing activity take place in a cell invisible to the living eye? Is not such activity the product of consciousness awareness, proving the presence of intelligent life in its lowest denominator? We would say it's not thinking, it's just reacting, it's just instinctive. It knows what to do. Nothing has to tell it. Furthermore, a single living cell in the form of a bacterium can move about on its own and live its own specialized, frequently excited life within the environment, or as a virus doing a deadly specialized work of attacking specific targets within living organisms. Alternatively, the cell may be fixed within an organism, carrying out its own highly important work of construction and maintenance of some part of the organism. Such work produces living material exactly suited and necessary to the living organ on which it works, be it parts of the human body or of animal life or plant, such as human toes and spleen, or animal fur and tusks, or fish scales and feathers of birds, or bark of tree and foliage on branches, or petals and stalk of flowers, or antennae of the butterflies and their gauzy wings, the reptilian skin of crocodiles and their teeth, the eyes of squid and their skins, which change color according to need of camouflage. Each of these completely diverse and seemingly unrelated physical phenomena are created by the individual, specialized work of billions and billions and billions of identical living cells. So do you hear that? The cells are exactly the same, but where they are used gives a purpose to that cell. It's the raw material. It's the raw material. On contemplating the magnitude and diversity of the work accomplished by a simple living cell invisible to the naked eye, can you believe in a mechanistic universe? It would be possible to do so if the matter produced by such cells was illogical, offering no plausible purpose behind or reason for its existence, devoid of personal consciousness. But this is not so. These identical living cells work together in harmony within man or beast, to make a liver with its multiple duties within a body, to create an intricate eye, having its own specific purposes of putting the entity into direct and intelligent touch with its environment, incorporating the assistance of the brain, or strong bones expressly and intricately designed in conjunction with tendons and muscles, to unite with others in such convenient ways as to enable full and supple movement of the entity. Just think of the intelligent that the thought of us tells the brain to move the arm, and the brain does everything after that. First, we have the thought, raise the arm. And the brain is the receiver of that thought and the producer, the activator to make it happen. Okay. So in thinking of the arm moving, if we put our attention on every single muscle that moves and the intelligence, the consciousness, talking to all of those cells and speaking to them as to their specific purpose and how to do it, it can't be mechanical. I guess that's the only point I was making. It would be possible to do so if the matter produced by such cells was illogical, offering no plausible purpose behind or reason for its existence, devoid of personal consciousness. Imagine if I had to tell myself to breathe or to digest or for my heart to beat. Whew. Thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, consciousness, that you do that for me. So my mind is free to pursue all the things of joy in this life. But this is not so. I'm sorry I keep interrupting. These identical living cells work together in harmony with man or beast. Oh, I read that. To make a liver, well, I'm going to finish it though since I started. To make a liver with its multiple duties within a body. To create an intricate eye having its own specific purposes of putting the entity into direct and intelligent touch with its environment, incorporating the assistance of the brain, or strong bones expressly and intricately designed in conjunction with tendons and muscles, to unite with others in such convenient ways as to enable full and supple movement of the entity. Furthermore, the cells never intrude on each other's work. When creating a kidney, they do not suddenly make an ear. When creating hair, they do not suddenly launch in making skin. No. Cells create the scalp, the self-same cells create the hair. The only difference between skin and hair cells is the work they do, second by second throughout a lifetime. Why? What is the motivating and inspiring factor? Accident? What organizing intelligence set the entire process of creation in motion, from the most fundamental level of the formation of simple elements out of free electrical particles within space? Was the organizing intelligence the combining of elements to form chemicals? Was the organizing intelligence the correct combination of specific chemicals to form living molecules? Was the organizing intelligence the correct combination of living molecules to make a living cell which can take in nutrition? Was it organizing intelligence which excretes waste, build according to clear-cut specifications, move about and sustain all this? Is it organizing intelligence enormous that creates enormous edifice of creation consistently throughout billions of years? Not only this, but what is the motivating force which is designed and successfully evolved within living systems and entities, billions and billions of different ways in which to fertilize seeds of every kind, whether they be those of plants, insects, reptiles, birds, animals, or human beings, evolving for each an intelligent system of procreation suited to climatic conditions, the production of vegetation in the environment in order to ensure survival? Is not survival also evidence of intelligent, purposeful activity? And having accomplished this great feat of creativity, should you not question how it is that every living species has its own individualistic way of rearing its young and protecting it as far as possible until the young are capable of survival on their own? Is this not love for creation active in the highest form? You cannot move on from this analysis of what the human intelligence has to say about the origins of life and creativity without mentioning the all-important molecules, DNA, which is said to carry the plan for the whole organism, plant or baby, Furthermore, these DNA molecules give the instructions to the cells, informing them they shall build according to the chromosomes deposited by the seed. Yes, indeed, in place of intelligence, science has given you the DNA molecules as your source of existence, your supreme leader, your director of creation upon which materialistic flimsy cells, the whole of creation must depend for its survival. Behold the glorious DNA, Lord of your creation. I love Christ's tongue-in-cheek humor. From whence did the DNA cells draw their intelligent directional powers? Science is quite satisfied now that it has been able to satisfactorily explain why the various species of every kind replicate themselves so accurately and consistently. Science would have you believe that you live in a purely mechanistic universe, that the phenomenon of evolution arises out of chance mutations and the survival of the fittest. If you study the various organisms of creation, the multifold and differing activities of related species, can you truly believe in such an unlikely materialistic concept? It has been no more coincidence that today, to enable you to discover the vast intelligence behind creation, you have numerous creative people who embark on different journeys to explore, determine, and photograph the habitats and habits of wild creatures and plants. You are entertained and instructed by a feast of facts and photographs of the wonders of your universe. We are very fortunate to have this. Christ says, as Jesus, "In my time on earth, I had no such marvels to refer to in order to teach the Jews the universal truth of existence. I only had domestic animals and birds to use as examples of the marvelous inventiveness and intelligence and awareness inherent in every living thing. Nowhere has it been written in the Gospels that I referred to a high and mighty Jehovah as creator, as was customary with the Jewish leaders. No, I turned to the countryside, the flowers and birds, and tried to show my fellow countrymen that they were surrounded by a marvelous and miraculous creation. 2,000 years ago in your dimension, we lacked your modern scientific background to be able to intelligently observe and explain the activity of what I term the Father everywhere around them. To discover your true source of being, I ask you to take stock of the unimaginable and indescribable complexity and diversity of purposeful work plainly evident in penguins and pigs. Can the human mind replicate any of the most basic of activities within, say, the digestive system, which swiftly summons up the requisite enzymes and hormones necessary for digestion? How dare the finite mind, which is incapable of perceiving clearly the true creative processes governed by instinctual knowledge, presume to state unequivocally, defying contradiction, that it understands the true origins of creation and the forces out of which creation took form? What arrogance! These men can only think according to what their eyes tell them. I view the present scientific ignorance with loving compassion, a degree of amusement, and a great all-consuming passion to puncture their pride. For until someone can penetrate their self-satisfaction and position of infallibility, a true mating of eternal verities and human scientific knowledge can never take place. But it must take place. Otherwise, human spiritual evolution will remain at a standstill, a stalemate. And that's what I heard in the opening meditation. They're either constructive, destructive, or keeping it as is. I forgot the term I used. Stand still. So if I'm in a constructive mode of mindset, then even my default consciousness is still in that same mode of operandi as my lower consciousness of, keeping that, and that's what Christ is saying here. There's no evolution in There's an evolution in science, but it's still contained and maintained and limited by the current mindset. That's why quantum physics is so big, because it's broken out of that limitation. Quantum physics realizes something before the beginning. The scientific mind is too full of finality, devised book law, accepted formulas and equations, and the need for their fellows' approval to permit mystical penetration by higher intelligence. On my behalf, I ask readers of these letters to form an association, to challenge science, and ask at what point of the evolution of the material world is consciousness first determinable. I'm going to read that again because that's very important. On my behalf, I ask readers of the letters to form an association, to challenge science, and ask, quote, at what point in the evolution of the material world is consciousness first discernible? I repeat and mean what I say. Ask the scientist at what point in the evolution of the world is consciousness first discernible? In the living cell? If in the living cell, ask whether it's discernible in the living molecules which combine to make a cell and encase itself in such an intelligently designed membrane, permitting the intake of selected food and excretion of solid waste. How does it recognize toxic waste? And if it should be conceded that consciousness might be present in living molecules, should you not ask why the chemical properties which became a living molecule might not themselves have possessed consciousness, which eventually impelled and propelled them into the life-giving combination to make a molecule? And having gone back thus far into the origin of existence, the chemical properties, you must still question why consciousness should only become a viable presence within the chemicals. Why not within the elements in which individuality first took shape? And if in the elements, why should it be denied that consciousness propels the electrical particles to form the elements? Is it rational to deny such a possibility? And having reached such a possibility, should you not go further and ask from whence comes electromagnetism? What is the reality of electricity more than streaks of fierce light now described by science as photons and electrons? And what is the reality of magnetism more than twofold energies of bonding and rejection, energy impulses, which have brought stability and order into chaos? Ask science, from whence comes the electromagnetism which is responsible for the most basic steps in the creation of an ordered and orderly universe of an unimaginable complexity and diversity? I will now attempt to put into your words that which is beyond all words and presently beyond all individualized earthly comprehension. Therefore, the intellect, although it assists the brain to understand intellectually the spiritual realities I am putting before you, the intellect, also creates a barrier to true spiritual perception and experience. For this reason, regard the following references to the ultimate universal dimension as only guidelines. Ideas shadow consciousness forms of the reality behind and within your universe. Take each idea one by one into meditation. What I am about to explain to you is entirely within and of consciousness, without parameters and without boundaries. Think of it, energy is just energy. The wall is not a barrier to itself. The energy and the wall are one. So the energy from me and from you goes through the walls, ceilings, and floors and is one with the totality of energy. In truth, we are an expression of the one energy, the one consciousness. And this is what Christ is bringing to us, is that all the consciousness around us supports us. and we tell that consciousness what to be, or we listen to that consciousness, which is, and which knows how to create, just as it creates the beauty of the fish in the rivers and streams and the forests around the earth and the plains. So it's all intelligent consciousness working with itself, within itself. Persevere. The light will gradually, perhaps imperceptibly, penetrate your mind, and you will have little bursts of insight. So Christ is encouraging us. We're not going to get this like overnight. You know, Jesus didn't wake up one morning in the desert and said, I got it. 40 days and 40 nights, 6 weeks, he was there, questioning, asking, seeking, believing, cleansing, and being supported all through it. And got these direct from the Father within him. That's why he was so intimate with him. So don't expect this an overnight thing. Be patient with ourselves. It's an evolution. We have a lot to undo. We have generations. Christ brought this 2,000 years ago, and we're still evolving in it. So be patient with ourselves. There are many who have experienced a little burst of insight, have briefly felt a touch of divine consciousness, and then hardly daring to continue to believe in such a transcendent moment of awareness, have begun to question, doubt, and finally dispel the little inflow of divine consciousness. Beware you do not do this. Disbelief will set you back and mesh you in the material plane of existence more than you will ever know. So allow the questions to be there, allow the challenges to be there, just don't entertain them. Whatever you are given and able to receive, hold fast to it and do not doubt. These are things he wants us to contemplate on. Doubt destroys steady progress because it creates its own consciousness forms, which suppress and even eradicate the insight you had gained previously. Therefore, your choice of thoughts, belief or disbelief, doubt or faith, construct or destroy your progress in your search for truth. Any denial erases from your consciousness the progress which has been previously made. Furthermore, the higher you ascend in spiritual truth, the more powerful do your thoughts become. Therefore, create and hold fast to your own spiritual momentum and allow no one to intrude and undermine that momentum. Hold firm to your former perceptions. In times of doubt, cruise along in positive thoughts, using enlightening affirmations, clinging to earlier inspirational guidance when your consciousness frequencies of vibration were higher. By use of your willpower, choosing affirmations containing golden nuggets of spiritual truth, return to this higher level of consciousness again and again, the thought above the thought. Do not, through mental laziness, wholly surrender to the ebb and flow of spiritual consciousness energies and become a spiritual seesaw. I cannot emphasize this danger of self-obstruction strongly enough. Become actively aware of it. If you know anything of the accounts of my life in Palestine, you will recall that I too suffered the phenomenon of ebb and flow of spiritual consciousness and found it necessary to absent myself in the hills to pray and meditate and renew my spiritual strength. Therefore, understand your dry periods, but do not give way to them by yielding passively to an undesirable change in your attitudes and mental emotional patterns. As you conscientiously draw upon your source of being for new strength and the upliftment of your consciousness frequencies, so will these negative periods be greatly reduced in strength and duration. I repeat, at all times, beware how you use your minds. Let your mental activity always be constructive, that it may contribute to your own spiritual growth rather than its constant hindrance. And so we end here for this week and pick up next week right where we ended, right following the asterisks centered in the between the paragraphs. So I'd like to end by just giving thanks to you for being with me. Thanks for making this time meaningful for both of us, all of us. Thank you for being on the path and the journey you're on, as I am. And be gentle with yourself as I am with myself. And see a new vision. See a new world. It is what you see it as. If you change your perception, your world changes. And that's the beauty. We control our attitudes. We can blame someone else for a different attitude, but ultimately, it's we who make the change. It's we who think the thoughts. It's we who choose the thoughts. It's we who are aware of the alternative thoughts. And it's we who choose to activate the particular thought that we activate. Many blessings to you, and thank you. And see you next week.